So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Kirsty Murphy, as already said. I'm an Accelerator Programme Manager here at the Connected Places Catapult. We're really pleased that you've joined us here online and also in person, and this session's on place-based decarbonisation of transport. So we want to discuss how Department for Transport is delivering on its strategic aim to reduce environmental impact of transport, and how they're working with Connected Places Catapult and Innovate UK to invest in R&D as an enabler of place-based decarbonisation. We've got a really great panel with us here today, and it's going to allow us to discuss the theme through different lenses. So starting off and setting the scene will be Sophia Berry, who is the Head of Net Zero Policy at DfT. We'll then be moving on to Sophie Randall from Innovate UK, who is the Innovation Lead for Mobility and Cities, and she'll be talking about how what IUK is doing in this space. We're then going to move on to the Catapult's very own Alan Nettleton, and he'll be describing his work as the Concept Demonstration Team Lead in our new mobility services. And he'll also be joined by Tash, Hartke, and she's going to share with us how Lambeth Council have put DfT's strategy into place with her Kerbside strategy programme. And then finally, I'll be discussing our Accelerator programme, which is about decarbonisation of transport, not only to support SMEs, but really importantly, to enable local authorities to overcome those challenges faced when procuring innovative technology that will decarbonise local transport. There'll be a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, so please pop your questions into Slido, both at home and in the room. So I'm going to hand over to Sophia, first of all, from Department for Transport.
Thanks. Is this the...
It is, yeah.
Okay, just checking, get that right. Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm going to do a sort of quick context, if you like, on why this is important. So setting out a bit of what the sort of wider net zero context is, why do we care about local decarbonisation, and why is innovation so important for that? So let me see if amazing. So in terms of the wider context, this graph here gives you an idea of the sort of scale of the challenge that we're looking at. Transport remains the largest emitting sector for the UK, and that was at 28% of our emissions in 2022. So it's a big challenge, and why transport decarbonisation is so important, and so important to the Department for Transport. And there is loads of work ongoing. So we've got a really ambitious cross-modal set of plans that set out in the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, but also Net Zero Strategy, followed up much more recently with the government's Net Zero Growth Plan and also the Carbon Budget Delivery Plan. So we're all setting out how to reduce our emissions to meet net zero by 2050 and our carbon budgets along the way. So there is work going across all modes in transport. At the moment, you will hear from colleagues working on zero-emission HGVs later on, so I won't spoil any exciting details and information they'll share. But one of the other sort of key pillars of work that's been going on that came into law on the 3rd of January this year is the zero-emission vehicle mandate. And that sets out that by 2030, 80% of new cars and 70% of new vans sold in Great Britain will be zero emission, and that will get up to 100% by 2035. And obviously alongside that, loads of work going on to deliver on a kind of affordable, available transport electric vehicle charging infrastructure programme as well. But it's not just about zero emission vehicles. Obviously, the department's working a lot on all different modes, but also thinking about public transport and supporting active travel through walking and cycling. So if that's kind of the bigger picture of what's going on, in a very quick sort of snapshot, why care about this sort of local decarbonisation perspective? So within the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, we set out that place-based decarbonisation as a kind of concept is all about reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector, but doing so in a way that recognises the sort of needs, challenges and opportunities that are happening in sort of local areas or being faced by local areas across the UK in order to meet net zero by 2050. And we also sort of have set out that by taking this place-based approach, a local decarbonisation focus, that can help our villages, our towns, our cities to become cleaner, greener, healthier, more prosperous places that we all can live, work and enjoy. And it's particularly important from an emissions perspective because about 82% of UK emissions are estimated to be within the scope of influence of local authorities, so that local decarbonisation focus is really important. And we know, of course, that for transport, local and regional level organisations are at the forefront of engaging with their communities, with their businesses, all working on transport decarbonisation and supporting people to travel in a way that works best for them, but also offering sustainable travel choices too. And local leaders play a really key role in being able to deliver that for their communities, helping to create jobs, grow the economy and levelling up the country too. So place-based, very important. But why is innovation so important as sort of part of our work on decarbonisation? So just sort of briefly, within the department, we have one of our strategic aims, which is reducing environmental impacts. And of course, transport decarbonisation is a really key part of that. But we know that in order to deliver on that, we're going to need new technologies, new ideas, new innovative and exciting solutions. And that's where our key enabler for our strategic aims, one of which is science and technology, comes in, and that sort of investment in innovative solutions. So we recognise that in order to deliver on what we're doing in transport decarbonisation, innovation is going to be key. And for local areas as well, innovation can help to unblock some of those challenges that are being faced, some of the most difficult things, but also create opportunities to do things better and hopefully to share some of that as well, things that might be applicable in different parts of the country. So that is why the department is supporting lots of different work in this space, and colleagues in the panel will talk you through that all in a lot more detail. But there's a few up here on the board on our Rural Innovation and Decarbonisation Fund, but also our £2 million decarbonisation demonstrators programme that we're working with Innovate UK on, and the Connected Places Catapult also supporting the Accelerator programme that Kirsty mentioned as well. And this collaboration between government, organisations like Innovate, CPC, but also local communities and industry is so important to be able to meet this challenge and deliver on decarbonisation and reach net zero. So I won't go on anymore, but hopefully that's given you a bit of context, and I'll pass back to Kirsty or to Sophie. I don't know what happens next.
Thank you. So hello everyone, my name is Sophie Randall. I am the Innovation Lead for Mobility and Cities at Innovate UK, so I work on a number of projects across the transport and urban space. Oh no, they're moving ahead without me. So for those of you who don't know Innovate UK, we are the UK government's innovation agency. We support UK businesses and organisations to develop new products, services and business models in order to bring prosperity and opportunity to the UK, but also to help to solve our real world challenges that we are facing. And I'm just going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking to you today around some of the work that we have been doing in the net zero and place space, and then I'm going to zone that down into our most recent transport decarbonisation demonstrator competition, which we are doing alongside the DFT. So from 2018 to 2023, Innovate UK funded the Prospering from the Energy Revolution Challenge Fund. You might have heard of this referred to as the PIFA Fund. This challenge fund consisted of £104 million, and it aimed to encourage businesses and researchers to work with local organisations in order to accelerate innovation within smart local energy systems. And the objective of this was to show how these systems can provide clean and affordable energy whilst also attracting investment and creating high-value jobs for the area. Now, as part of this challenge, a report was commissioned up there in the corner titled Accelerating Net Zero Delivery. Now, this piece of research analysed both the economic and social benefits gained by taking a place-based approach to climate action within UK city regions. So it presented novel data and research, and it compared the benefits available from a range of place-specific approaches and place-agnostic approaches, so just general one-size-fits-all approach. And that included how to design and deliver climate action in the most effective way. And the report had some absolutely incredible findings. Its analysis showed that using a place-specific approach could generate more than double the benefit and at a significantly lower cost than just a place-agnostic approach. So to put that into numbers, a place-specific approach could save £137 billion in investment costs, and it could generate an additional £431 billion in energy savings and wider social benefits. It also found that place-based solutions could target areas such as building and heating of buildings, and also transport decarbonisation, which are two areas which have flatlined over the last decade in terms of decarbonisation progress. So really tackling those hard to decarbonise areas. And lastly, the report also found that effective action can create huge social benefits across the UK. So not just economic, but really helping to level up life across the UK with things such as productivity, health, air quality benefits. So ultimately, the report made a really strong economic case for why we should be designing with a place-based approach and how place-based delivery can work. So that leads us on to the Net Zero Living Programme. So this was kind of developed through the findings from the PIFA programme. This is a £60 million 3-year programme, and it's aiming to help local authorities and businesses across the UK to accelerate their transition to net zero. And we have over 50 local authorities involved in the moment, so a really high number of them. And we believe that local authorities are perfectly positioned in order to be able to transform their economies for net zero and to mobilise both public and private investment. However, we know that at the moment they lack the capacity, the skills, the resource in order to be able to capitalise on this. And so our Net Zero Living programme is really helping to offer targeted support to build that capacity and to tackle these challenges, to prove what can be done and to share experiences along the way. So together our places, and they're categorised into demonstrators, pathfinders, fast followers, all dependent on how far along their net zero living journey they are building together a community of practice. And this will ensure that knowledge exchange and shared learning is facilitated across the community and the cohort. Alongside this, we also have a Future Ready programme. This is a package of support to help accelerate the delivery of net zero and to really generate learnings beyond just the 50 local authorities we have, so to share those learnings beyond. So, as I mentioned, we have a wide cohort of places participating in this programme, and they come from across the UK. So you can see we've got Northern Ireland down to the Isle of Wight down in the south, all the way up to the Shetland Islands. So we have a really good coverage across the UK. And there's a number of aspects to the Net Zero Living programme, but ultimately it is about working closely with local authorities to help them to understand innovation better and empower them to achieve net zero by overcoming the barriers that they face, such as things like engaging stakeholders, engaging citizens, tackling procurement and governance processes, attracting finance, so those kind of supply chain issues that they might have. So the Net Zero Living programme ultimately is about creating a course of delivery of how to achieve net zero and helping them to learn from that journey. And as I said, we really want to be sharing these findings. So once we start to generate them, we'll be enabling other local authorities that aren't part of the Net Zero Living programme to see what's been going on so they can learn from this. So where does all that lead to us working with DFT? The DFT, as Sophia had mentioned, they released their Transport Decarbonisation Plan back in July 2022, and that set out their approach to decarbonisation. And within that, they referenced that local authorities and local solutions will be really key to achieving that. Last year, they also released the Future of Transport plan, and that focused more around rural areas or hard to decarbonise areas. And that also recognised that understanding the unique aspects of a place is going to be crucial in allowing them to achieve net zero and defining their net zero transport solutions. So hopefully you can see that a lot of the thinking DFT have been doing aligns quite closely and very closely indeed with what we've been doing at Innovate UK. And so we both believe that, you know, bringing local authorities into the realm of innovation and getting them to work with innovative organisations is going to be crucial to achieve net zero. So that leads me on to our most recent competition that we ran, the Transport Decarbonisation Demonstrator. So it was up to £2 million funding competition. It was launched back in November. It is closed now, unfortunately, and it is currently being delivered by Innovate UK. We had two aims for this competition. So we wanted to see projects which had the potential to reduce carbon and other harmful emissions from the local transport network. And we also wanted to see projects which were facilitating that collaboration between local authorities and businesses. And as part of the application, consortiums did have to apply with a business or organisation as a lead and at least one local authority within their consortium. So really trying to bring local authorities into the mix with that. We also asked applicants to demonstrate a place-based approach within their application. So we did not define this as a geographically stated area, but simply that they had to understand and reference the unique attributes of a place. So whether that's to do with how hilly or how flat the area is, the demographics, the heritage of the place, how it connects to nearby areas, they just needed to show that they are demonstrating that within their application. And we were hoping that having the local authorities as part of that consortium would help to bring that knowledge in with the innovation, so they would truly understand the place and be able to bring that place-based focus into the applications. So as I've mentioned, bringing local authorities and businesses together is really crucial if we're going to achieve net zero quicker. And so we need to start encouraging things such as this. So always at the end, but just to give you a little overview of the competition, applications have been received, assessed, successful applicants have been informed. Unfortunately, I can't give too much away as it's currently under embargo, but look out for the sort of end of May, start of June. We will hopefully have an announcement on those projects. But just to give a few highlights, really, we had a really high number of strong applications into the competition. So many of them scored well above the Innovate UK threshold, and that really shows that there is that appetite out there for local authorities and innovators to decarbonise in this in the local network. We also saw within the application processes that local authorities are still struggling with a lot of challenges when working within innovation. So we had a lot of questions and queries around procurement, resourcing, and those were really coming through within the application process. And it just demonstrates why the work that we're doing through the Net Zero Living programme is so important. So we can try and allow them to tackle these challenges and come through with successful applications in the future. And lastly, just to give a kind of taster of some of the projects that you might be expecting, we have ones looking at EV infrastructure planning, mobility hubs, drone use as delivery. We've got projects looking at home waste collection, projects looking at the homeschool run. So a real range of projects within that. So thank you for listening to me today. Appreciate your time. Yeah, and I'll be around this afternoon. So if you do have any questions, feel free to come and speak with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, just a few minutes from myself. I'm Nettleton from Connected Places Catapult. So I'm in the New Mobility Technologies team. We work across rail, road, aviation and maritime, and I'm just going to be saying a little bit about some of the research we've been doing into transport decarbonisation, particularly from a local authority perspective. So there's strategies and actions that we've been thinking about that local authorities may wish to consider. So just a little bit about myself first. I mean, I've been at the Catapult now for 10 years, unbelievably. I was at transport consultancies for 11 years before that, so it's scary to think I've been at Catapult almost long, because I still think of myself as a transport planning professional rather than a transport innovation person. But I think uniquely privileged to see how the two worlds collide and how traditional transport needs to adapt to innovation in this space. I'm involved in Net Zero Neighbourhoods Hub in Dudley. I'm involved in hydrogen innovation initiatives, zero emission road freight, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But on this particular project, we've been working across the Catapult just to think about different angles of transport decarbonisation, from transport innovation to green finance to integrated planning. So I'm just going to present some of a few minutes on some of our findings. So what do we mean by transport innovation? So we've come up with this definition for our purposes, a multi-stage process of transforming ideas and into new and improved products and services for the movement of people and goods. And I was trying to think of a good example of a really impactful transport innovation, and I was just watching Saturday Night TV with Michael McIntyre, and it just suddenly came to me. So the wheel has been with us for thousands of years. It's not really moved on that much, other than they hollowed it out and we've added some new materials. But it's not all that useful by itself either. We need to combine that innovation with thousands of other innovations to end up with other kind of vehicles. I was trying to think of other, maybe let's get some audience participation here. Any other innovations that have been as revolutionary as the wheel? Anybody want to shout out? The internet. Very good. Sorry? The steam engine, railways, metro systems, yeah. Combustion engine, was that? Yeah. So motor vehicles, bicycles, lifts. I was thinking, without lifts, we wouldn't have high-rise buildings. All these innovations have been extremely important, and we could go on forever just talk about that, but I won't. But the point is, they piggyback on each other, and we have to think of them in the context of the wider societal and transport systems. And for this, you need systems engineering. So within our new mobility technology team, we've got a lot of systems engineers. And this diagram is on gov.uk as a nice example of how to think about systems engineering and confirming what we're trying to achieve. So the 4 steps in the middle there confirm the goal. An example might be something like encouraging fewer internal combustion engine vehicle trips. Understand the system, stakeholder conversations, analysis, surveys. Maybe we can use more sophisticated techniques to help us understand that system. Co-design and test. How are we actually going to implement something that might help us change the status quo? So, as a local authority, they might think about how do we change our own transport movements to electric vehicles? How do we help to enable new solutions, such as micro-mobility or other forms of lower carbon transport, and investing in enabling infrastructure, whatever that might be, whether it's electric vehicle charge points, it could just be old-fashioned, better walking routes, cycle routes, etc. And then obviously implement, monitor and evaluate, a very crucial step in working out whether it's working or not. So a quick shout out to the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre, who have put out this report, The Art of the Possible in Public Procurement, because one role of a local authority is very much involved in procurement, and Rakesh Shah and Sam Markey are here at the event. I would suggest catching up with them. But this report really sets out what approaches local authorities can take, and businesses as well, to encourage that innovation into the procurement process. And I think it's a really important document. But some of the key messages, being the intelligent client, you need to really understand what the technology is doing. Technology scanning, you can talk to catapults, you can talk to experts, you can talk to small businesses, large businesses across the world to understand where technology is heading. Defining the problem and not the solution. It's very easy to think that we know what the answer is straight away, but actually have we properly decided what the problem is that we're trying to solve in the first place. And people are absolutely key. I know that there's a lot of pressure on local authorities, but allocating time to training, to getting people on board with the innovation can help that flourish within a local authority. So Just moving briefly on to green finance. So what do we mean by green finance? Funding dedicated towards sustainable environmental projects where investments not only provide a financial return but also benefits to the environment. And this is really just to highlight that there's an awful lot of work going on in this space. Whereas this used to be the domain of things like energy efficiency schemes and that kind of thing, now they are being applied to transport schemes with that transport decarbonisation focus. And so there's an awful lot of potential funding routes: government funding, grants, subsidies, guarantees, government low interest rates, self-financing route, use of council reserves or revenue generation, tax incremental funding, prudential borrowing, etc., etc., Section 106 agreements using developer contributions, etc. Debt instruments like green bonds, green loans, sustainability-linked bonds and loans. The list goes on. PPPs, which was touched on this morning, impact investments. There's a lot of terminology here that I don't understand. Speak to the colleagues next door who are working on the 3CI team and working across the Catapult for more information. Community engagement investment funds, interesting way of sort of crowdsourcing investment into projects. And there's a lot of tools and resources. Other than the 3CI team next door, we've got reports by the likes of Green Finance Institute and Innovate UK, of course the Green Finance Strategy, and there's Net Zero Go, run by the Energy Systems Catapult. Local Government Association put out guidance, and of course this was a useful website, Carbon Net Zero Funding and Grants, where you can see what's coming up and available. So that's all I just want to say on that, and I hope that's useful. And I'm just going to introduce Tash, who was involved in some of our consultation work and was an excellent local authority case study presenter. So we'll let you hear that now. Thank you.
Hey. Thank you very much. Hi everyone, I'm Tash Hartke. I work for Lambeth Council in South London. I'm going to be talking to you about our Kerbside strategy and how it's contributing towards decarbonising transport in Lambeth. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of the strategy itself and then just touch on a few areas where we have used or are using innovation in terms of policy design, but also in terms of practice and how we're delivering the strategy. So for a little bit of background context, the Kerbside itself, I always should define that at the start of every talk or every presentation. So the Kerbside is the space where we usually park our cars. And the background context of us having a Kerbside strategy is that it's come out of our climate action plan in Lambeth. So our climate action plan has targets for us to be net zero by 2030. And you can see this diagram on the right here shows that nearly a quarter of the emissions in Lambeth are actually transport emissions. So one of the key priorities within our climate action plan are to reduce those emissions. And in the climate action plan, we defined that we needed to reduce motor traffic by 27% by 2030, and also highlighted the need to have a Kerbside strategy. So one of the things that I kind of want to emphasise is how is like the language that we use and talking about the Kerbside and moving away from just thinking about parking policy to thinking about Kerbside management and that Kerbside space as a whole. So not just about how we're generating parking revenue or managing loading and parking and freight and servicing, but also how does it contribute to other modes of transport, to active travel, to more space for greenery and that kind of thing as well. And we kind of want to use the Kerbside as a tool to make it easier for people to walk and cycle and wheel, because if we need to reduce motor traffic by 27% by 2030, then we need to give people other options and make other ways of getting around a bit easier. So to give you an overview of the strategy itself, the main aim is that we want 25% of our Kerbside to be sustainable by 2030. Currently, or when we launched the strategy, just 6% of our Kerbside was sustainable. And we've got 4 key priorities or areas through which we're doing that. So one is enabling accessible and active travel. One is creating places for people. So that's things like parklets or, allowing cafes and restaurants to use outdoor space in the Kerbside space. One is increasing climate resilience, so things like having more street trees, more suds, making our streets more adapted to climate change in the future. And the final one is reducing traffic and transport emissions. So that's things like having space for car clubs and for electric vehicle charging and that kind of thing. And just a little bit more background context for Lambeth is that in our borough, 60% of households don't actually have access to a car. But we use, or at the time of the strategy launch, we used 94% of our curbside space to manage parking, which is really wild when you think about it. It's a huge mismatch, which we need to change. So one of the innovation areas has come through monitoring our curbside strategy. So like probably many local authorities in the country, or us just a few years ago, we weren't really sure actually what our curbside was made up of. And something that has made this so much easier to manage is digitisation of traffic orders. So that's a whole borough snapshot in the picture on the right. And when we first figured out, when we launched the strategy, kind of what's the curbside made up of at the moment, what does it look like, all that grey space makes up that 94% I was talking about to manage parking, so actual parking spaces, double and single yellow lines. And the big surprise was that 9% of our curbside was used for private driveways. So the space immediately in front of people's private driveways, which is effectively becomes a private space. If someone is using it for access into their house, we can't use it for public uses. And it was a real surprise to us that 9% of our curbside was used for private driveway access, and only 6% of our curbside was used for sustainable uses like trees, cycle parking, loading bays, EV bays, that kind of thing. So to talk a little bit more about the monitoring, that digitisation of traffic orders has massively helped. So the picture from the previous slide, we are using that and kind of monitoring that regularly. And one of the really helpful things that we've done is with Appiway, we've developed kind of a dashboard to look at how our curbside uses are changing over time. So I'm not expecting you to be able to read all the small numbers in the writing. It's just to give you an idea that this, the graph here on the left shows kind of the split of different sustainable curbside uses. So things like bus stops or pedestrian crossings or e-scooter bays, that kind of thing. And then the diagram on the right shows how curbside uses are changing over time. So we can look at this kind of at any time. It refreshes every time new traffic orders go live. It's a really helpful way to monitor what we're doing a lot more easily, and also to communicate what we're doing to decision makers, to funders, to councillors, any relevant stakeholders. And it just makes it that much more easy to track our progress towards that 25% sustainable curbside goal. So the next innovation area I wanted to touch on, I guess, is less of like a technical innovation area, more of like an innovation in policy, is having accessibility kind of at the core of the curbside strategy. I think like historically in a lot of kind of planning or transport guidance, accessibility has often been like an add-on, something we think about separately or afterwards. But our first priority in the strategy is enabling accessible and active travel. And you can see from these images here, this covers things like using inclusive design. So using the curbside as a space for all kinds of different things to make sure that our pavements are nice and clear. So e-scooters will go in the curbside. We'll start planting trees in the curbside where our pavements aren't wide enough. And this touches on quite a few areas across the council as well. So things like, can we put bins in the curbside if a particular street is really difficult to walk down with a wheelchair, or wheel down with a wheelchair or a pushchair. And we have within that accessible and active travel kind of priority, we also have a commitment that we want to have our pavements be 2 metres wide in Lambeth. So for any new developments and for any kind of new projects, we always try and stick to that as a rule. And then one other area that I want to touch on is talking about pricing principles. So one of the areas within the curbside strategy is that if you are kind of driving vehicles that are really polluting or worse for the environment, you should be paying more for your parking than, let's say, or you should be paying more full stop than people who are using public transport, don't own a car, or who are cycling everywhere. So in the last year, we've actually reduced what we charge people for cycle hanger spaces in Lambeth, because I think when we launched the strategy, the cheapest parking permit that you could get in Lambeth was still a bit cheaper than a cycle hanger space. So we wanted to make sure that we changed that. So it's cheapest to not have a car, to be using a cycle hanger space, to be using public transport. And then if your vehicle produces more greenhouse gases or more exhaust or non-exhaust pollutants, or if it takes up more space and increases congestion, then parking pricing will go up from there. And we're kind of implementing this through rounds of, through phased approaches kind of each year, but by 2030 we will have factored in kind of all of those. So thank you. So yeah, that's the end of my section. And if you've got any questions that we don't get to in the question portion as well, please do feel free to contact me. Thanks.
So thank you very much for all our speakers so far. I think it's fascinating to see how it goes from the strategy at DFT all the way through and down to you at Lambeth. So thank you for that. And we've got some Q&A already in. If anybody else wants to put some more questions into Slido, please do. But in the meantime, I'd like to finish off with a bit of an update on one of the Catapult's Accelerator programmes, which is the Decarbonisation of Transport Accelerator programme. So this Accelerator programme is a little bit different to one of our normal accelerators. And before I go into that, I want to just talk about what an accelerator is at the Catapult. So they are challenge-led programmes, generally around about 6 months long. And the idea is that they're going to accelerate disruptive products into the market. So effectively, we're essentially de-risking the incorporation of innovation into the supply chain for the partners that we work with, but also at the same time providing SMEs with the support they need to help them grow. And we've done a fair bit of it over the last 5 years. So this is quite a busy slide. I've even had to drop a few of the legacy programmes from it, and I've not even managed to put my own programme on it yet, so I need to find space. But as you can see, we work across the UK. We work across all the ecosystems, including freight, aviation, maritime and rail. And in fact, to date, we've delivered 26 cohorts across 12 different programmes. But back to today then, I'm here to talk about our Transport Decarbonisation Accelerator. So this is funded by Department for Transport to help them support their strategic priorities. So as you've heard already, DFT are undertaking a number of projects to invest in transport decarbonisation demonstrators, including the programme that Sophie has already talked to us about. And this programme definitely runs in parallel to that one. Unlike our other accelerator programmes, this one's very much focused on the challenges that local authorities face when they're embedding new transport innovations. So what kind of challenges are those? Well, things like understanding and assessing the most appropriate innovation products for their particular decarbonisation needs, developing awareness of how to procure those suitable technologies and innovations, and then importantly, how to embed that learning and benefits from the demonstrator activity into full-scale adoption. So this accelerator is designed to enable local authorities to engage with decarb demonstrators. It's going to help them develop appropriate procurement processes that will help to embed innovation within their areas. And of course, ultimately, that's all to reduce carbon consumption. The accelerator is also going to help upskill and assist those involved in procurement procedures to define, scope and understand the challenges that they set to their innovators. And it will also offer an opportunity to enact and apply lessons learned procurement procedures to be monitored and evaluation to take place through the live challenge setting. So the programme is split into 2 phases here. The first phase is the discovery phase. That includes a selection of local authorities to take part in the programme, and then the refinement of their individual decarbonisation challenge. And then at the beginning of May, you can see we move on to phase 2, and this is really where we see the traditional phases of a Catapult accelerator, starting with the launch of the challenge competition to the SME community. Through due diligence, we'll select up to 8 SMEs to be selected to work with 4 local authorities for a 6-month duration. And the products and approaches learned will be showcased at the Connected Places Summit this time next year, so you should get your tickets in early. Obviously, at this stage, the nature of those deliverables and the demonstrators are going to be agreed as part of that discovery phase, and they're very much dependent on the challenges that are defined by the local authorities, obviously within the context of low carbon transportation. So I don't have the details of those just yet. But where are we today then? So so far, we've selected our 4 local authorities and subnational transport boards. The cohort comprises both local authorities and subnational transport boards, and we've also covered all 3 types, so rural, urban, as well as mixed, and they are located across the UK. It's important to note that the local authorities have been selected on the merits of their challenge, as well as their commitment to the programme, and of course each one has a very separate challenge. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be holding quite a few workshops with the local authorities to refine that challenge to ensure that we have a successful open call. Then we'll be in a really good place to take these challenges to the market, and the open call will be published on our CPC's website in early May. So now onto my sales pitch to any of the SMEs that are out there. So I've said already that this accelerator is aiming to find new and innovative solutions and suppliers that have the potential to reduce carbon and other harmful emissions from our local transport networks. So at this stage in May, we'll be seeking proposals from SMEs who have innovative solutions to those challenges, and they will then join in partnership with the local authorities and subnational transport boards to trial their solution. Because of the focus of the accelerator, we're looking for SMEs with late-stage technology. And any UK registered SME who believes they've got an innovative solution to one of the challenges is eligible to apply. Local authorities and subnational transport boards might have existing relationships or awareness of local SMEs who they can believe will or be able to provide a solution to their challenges, and they might want to encourage that. However, I just want to be really clear that ultimately SMEs will be selected on the basis of whether they're the best fit for the challenge or the relevant challenge, not necessarily on their proximity to that local authority or subnational transport board. And in terms of funding, the local authorities will be passing funding directly through to the selected SMEs for direct project costs associated with their trial. So please watch out for this space, or watch this space for the launch in early May. But if anyone would like to register an interest in the programme, you can do so directly with me at that email address, or you can find me in LinkedIn, as Graham's already highlighted. I'm the one with a picture and a red plane in the background. So it really is an exciting programme here for both the local authorities and subnational transport boards to help develop their innovation procurement processes, but also for SMEs to be able to work with local authorities with an opportunity to start building relationships that importantly will help scale their solutions. So I'm going to stop there. We've already got some questions. So let me just switch all my bits and pieces around and sit down. So thank you very much for your presentations. I'm going to start off, oh great, we've got loads. We've got 17 minutes. So I'm going to start off first of all with asking, and I'll ask a couple of you this, I think, how innovation supports local authorities to take positive action and help the UK reach our pretty challenging net zero goals. I'm going to start with the FT because it makes sense to start there. Is that okay, Sophie?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, obviously, hopefully I've covered it a bit in my presentation as well, that innovation is a sort of key part. We need those new ideas, new technologies, new innovative solutions to be able to deliver on net zero, and doing so to support sort of local decarbonisation is really essential to be able to deliver on our net zero our carbon budgets and then reaching net zero by 2050. But it's not sort of just about decarbonisation either. I guess there's lots of really great additional benefits that come with this work too, including sort of increased mobility, people being able to access employment and services more easily. I think sometimes we can get focused just on the decarbonisation side, which is of course the sort of role of the work of my team as well. But there are lots of additional benefits to be gained from doing it too, and working locally on these innovative projects that come with these extra benefits. They're just fantastic for local communities. Can potentially help to sort of reduce things like, or improve things like air quality by reducing emissions, making things less congested by having sort of modes connecting up better. So yeah, I think there's lots of really great opportunities that come from the innovation in the decarbonisation space too.
Yeah, lots of benefits. Sophie, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, sure. I think I repeated it a lot in my presentation, that obviously we really, really believe that local authorities need to be brought along the innovation journey as well, because they're key to knowing and understanding the area and what's going to work for each individual unique place. I think a lot of the work that we've been doing is also around how we, we've got the supply, we have innovative solutions out there, but how do we unlock the demand? So how do we enable local authorities to overcome their procurement processes, their governance processes, the barriers that they typically face around stakeholder engagement, citizen engagement? And I think if we don't get them really involved in the innovation space and bring them along with us, we're never going to be able to kind of come against those challenges and really find the solutions to them. Strongly believe that getting local authorities included in innovation, particularly in the transport space, because that's where I work in, it is crucial.
Thank you. We've got lots of questions to get through, so I'm going to move on. And Sophie, this one again is probably for you. Urban and rural local authorities, are there differences in how they need to approach innovation or how they could approach it?
Well, I think there are differences. I mean, the types of journeys that are made are going to be very different. The environment in those places is very different, and so those need to become, be involved in the thought process behind what is carried out. However, I also think we need to not think of them as two separate places. It's not just urban and just rural. A lot of them are interconnected. There's lots of rural areas where there's commuters into the urban environment. And so although we need to be coming up with solutions for both areas and innovating across urban transport and rural transport, we also shouldn't be thinking of them in a siloed approach. We need to be thinking about how we integrate them and considering that systems approach when we are carrying out innovation.
Thank you. Tash, I've got one here for you. So obviously an urban environment. What lessons did the council learn that other local authorities could learn from?
I think one of them is kind of the importance of having accurate data, both to kind of plan and deliver projects within the Kerbside strategy and more widely. Things like using data that is available to also prioritise how we deliver. So, let's say we've got neighbourhoods that have less good public transport accessibility levels or higher deprivation levels or something, and picking those as kind of priority areas for rolling out curbside interventions. Sorry, do you mind repeating the first part of the question again?
Yeah, it's gone off my list now. About what lessons you learned. Thank you. You removed it.
Local authorities can learn from.
Yes. I think we've talked a lot today also about place-based decarbonisation. I guess that's what this section is about as well. One of the key lessons is kind of around engagement and bringing people with us. I think that's something that we're constantly learning and sharing learnings with other local authorities as we go. Is we have a clear policy position and like a data-backed position on why we need to change the way that transport works in Lambeth, why we need to get more people walking and cycling. And I think one of the lessons that we've learned and we're still learning is how to communicate that to people as we go. So when we're saying we're making this change in your area, your streets are going to look a little bit different, trying to communicate as clearly as we can and as in like a human jargon-free way as well to people, like this is why we're doing what we're doing. We're not trying to make it more difficult for you to drive to school or something, but this is about what we want our cities to look like in the future. So yeah, kind of I think engagement and bringing people with us is a key one.
That's really important. And actually, someone's also asked what the reaction was of local residents to the strategy. And follows on nicely from that. Yeah,
mostly positive, like mixed as you will get with anything from any local authority. Like some people were obviously a bit apprehensive at the idea of, are you taking away parking spaces? What does this mean? I know I always drive to get around. But actually lots and lots of people were really excited to hear about it and to hear about kind of how this could change their streets. Also particularly like local high streets using the curbside. During COVID, we all saw lots of cafes and businesses having seating outside and that sort of thing. For the most part, I think it was quite a positive reception. And I think also we have, like Lambeth have quite a large scale low traffic neighbourhood delivery programme, which like that in itself has probably a bit more headline generating in terms of like controversy or people being a bit more of a Marmite programme than the Kerbside strategy is. So I think people weren't as surprised that we have this emphasis on a shift away from private car use.
Yeah. Alan, I'm going to come to you next. So we know there are challenges facing the local authorities who want to use innovation in helping to reach net zero. How do you think they can tackle those?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd quite like to see a sort of a no stone unturned approach, really, to not just transport decarbonisation, but as you rightly say, making transport safer, making transport more accessible, more available, and just better, making the streets better, etc. So I put up the slide around systems thinking because I think that's really important. Thinking about how everything relates to everything else. And you just need to think through quite clearly, repeating myself, but the problem that we're trying to solve with each intervention. But I think the conferences like this are great. We have to keep really ahead of the technology if we can. I was in the AI conference just before, and some of the things that you could start to think about using AI for to improve transport is sort of mind-boggling, really. And we need to keep ahead of that curve if we can.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of you this one. How can organisations work together to share best practice and learning to maximise the benefit of programmes like those we've talked about today? So Sophie, I'll go to you with that one because you were a convener.
Yeah, that's really challenging, and I think that's what we're trying to address through the Net Zero Living programme is how do we share this knowledge, how do we ensure that it is shared amongst local authorities and transport bodies, because this is one of the barriers that we face is people develop incredible solutions and then it doesn't get communicated very well. I mean, events such as this, knowledge sharing, getting involved in forums, sharing papers, ensuring you're communicating well with nearby local authorities. It is a challenge that we face, and I mean, local authorities are very stretched at the moment, and I think sometimes that knowledge sharing is going as a back priority, and so it's just ensuring that we bring it to the forefront and talk about it when and where we can.
Thank you. Sophia, have you got anything to add from that from a government point of view?
Oh, I don't. What more we can do to sort of work together? Definitely these sorts of programmes, I think, as well. So the Transport Decarb demonstration, I mean, that's sort of what we're trying to achieve as well, sort of working together with Innovate, and then making the best use of all of the tools that Innovate already have as well through the Net Zero Living programme, and then also sort of using some of the other tools that our colleagues across government have as well. I think, Alan, you might have mentioned this, the Energy Catapult run Net Zero Go, but our colleagues in the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero tell us about that all the time, how we can use platforms like that to share information and not sort of duplicate information that we have as well. So trying to streamline as much as possible, but we know it's hard in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Tash, your presentation seems to have kicked off a lot of interest. So I'll ask a couple to you. So can Kerbside be used for small businesses like food trucks or plant shops?
Getting there and kind of yes. So one of the things that we're looking at is how our sort of licensing works for permits for that space. And yeah, if there are things that we can't easily grant, like tables and chairs licenses already, if we need to be a bit more innovative in how we allow people to use that space, maybe we just have to look at our internal procedures, for example. But we absolutely will get there in terms of rolling out more slightly different and unique uses of the Kerbside, like, I don't know, even having like play equipment or something, might not just be business use. So yeah, I think we just have to kind of look at how our internal processes work for that. But that is something that we want to do, and that falls within our second Kerbside priority of creating places for people, is that we want to have like an open and easy application route for businesses to use the Kerbside as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's also another popular question for you. Why was there such a strong emphasis on accessibility in your curbside strategy? Where did the drive for that come from?
It's a good question. I think accessibility feels like the baseline for everything. It's sort of, I think, in ways that we've thought about accessibility, I mean, like we kind of as a sector, I guess, like transport historically, has been a bit like thinking of it next after the main planning of projects and stuff. But actually, I think bringing accessibility to the forefront of the strategy is about getting the basics right. And it also kind of touches on the social model of disability as well. So we know, I'm not sure exactly like what the population of disabled residents is in Lambeth, but we know that for some people, like the built environment can be physically disabling, and we kind of have strong values around like equity and accessibility as a borough. So it's just, I think it speaks to our core values kind of as a borough, and how we want to design our streets.
Thank you. All right. The next popular one is, so what resources exist already for local authorities to access for innovation? We've covered a couple. Has anyone got any extra ones that we've not covered yet?
I can kind of touch on a few. They might be a little bit more niche.
Yeah,
but,
please do.
Yeah, happy
it's
to.
very relevant in terms of it being actually.
I think it's a really interesting space where lots more things are coming out. Like I'm learning about lots of new technologies and like products that are available at the moment. Things like bookable loading bays. Like that's not something that we used to have. I think it's a company called Grid Smarter Cities who are trialling that in quite a few areas. Things as well like NUAR, the National Underground Asset Register, which I think is in sort of a beta phase of being trialled at the moment, which is actually really helpful for project planning and delivery, because at the moment the way that in our transport team we have to look for utilities is quite clunky. You know, we'll go on sort of SafeDig and get some PDFs back and have to convert them to CAD files and stuff, and actually just having that as like a shape file that we can really easily access with just a few clicks is massively helpful. So I guess those are a couple of examples.
Thank you. Yeah, Alan.
Well, just to add, I think one thing that we're always looking for is good case studies, and if you can investigate a kind of a library of case studies and pick the ones that apply to your area and that you're most interested in, just seeing what works well elsewhere. And I don't think there's a very good way of capturing those nationally, so maybe that's something to think about. How we populate a sort of a library of case studies.
Sophie.
I was just going to say, if you're a local authority and haven't signed up to Innovate UK's newsletter or don't visit our grant funding page, make sure you do, because opportunities do come up. You just might not see them because typically I think Innovate UK has been associated with businesses, and so local authorities don't see it as an option for them. And then also we work very closely with what was formerly referred to as Innovate UK KTN. They're now Innovate UK Business Connect. They have a number of newsletters that you can sign up to. Lots of people working in the place space and net zero space, and they share a number of opportunities and reports, access to databases, basically sharing lots of knowledge. So highly recommend signing up for that as well. And if you want any guidance towards that, I'm happy to give you the links.
Great. I think we've got time for one very quick one. We've got loads of questions, so if your question's not been answered, please, I'm sure everyone will be happy to answer questions after the session if you catch people in the corridor. But Tash, there was a really interesting one just very quickly in a minute. Could you just talk quickly about how you engage with the local communities in your project? It says in the very interesting Kerbside project.
Yes. You're going to test me now because I can't remember all the headings. We've got an engagement framework, which is based off kind of a co-design framework of kind of educating communities about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve in their area, trying to bring them with us and get them to help shape the change that they're seeing in that area as well. And yeah, I suppose it depends on the project. Like we try and cross over with other programs as well. So Lambeth also have a child-friendly Lambeth program. So one of the things that we're trying to do is in sort of in suitable spots like pedestrianised or filtered spaces, you know, can we make our streets more child friendly as well? So can we do, can we run sort of workshops in schools and that kind of thing? But it very much depends on the project. But I think we kind of try and do as much speaking to people on the ground as we can, and as much speaking to people locally as we can, because I think often what we see a lot of with online consultations is lots of responses from people who feel very strongly either way, but actually don't live in that area. So trying to keep it local where we can as well is really important.
Really important. Well, we'll have to call it a day there, but judging by the number of questions that we've got unanswered here, it's really engaged people in the presentation. So thank you very much for your presentations and for your time. And like I say, I'm sure you can catch people in the corridors in the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.